Hello. If you were looking for a scare tonight, you've come to the right place. I'll be narrating an hour's worth of creepy horror stories that I found off of Reddit. So without further ado,
These are their stories.
I turned 18 in 2008, and on the day of my birthday, for reasons I won't bore you with, I packed up my things and moved out. For 4 years, I lived in my car, working as a barista from 6 to 2 and as a line cook from 4 to 10. My plan was to work until I had enough money for my own place, and then to either go to college or get a more stable job. Looking back on it now, I don't know how I did it, but by 22, I'd saved up a decent sum of money and began my hunt for a semi-permanent place of residence. I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and though housing prices weren't as bad as they are now, it was still a pricey county. After months of asking around, I was connected with Anders, an elderly man who was leasing a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house in North Hollywood for far below market rate. The catch, because there's always a catch when it comes to affordable housing, was that the house had been terribly maintained. It had been unoccupied for a year and would need some serious TLC before most people could comfortably reside in it. I, however, had been living out of a car for 4 years. As long as the place had running water, it would be an upgrade for me. I moved into the house in fall 2012. Anders gave me a tour before I got settled. He was a short, joyful old man, well-meaning, but how do I put this? Maybe not the most focused as a result of his age. At one point during the tour, he showed me the bathroom, then the master bedroom, then the bathroom again, then the master bedroom again. He was about to walk into the bathroom for a third time before I gently guided him down the hall. The house itself was livable but weathered. Dim lighting from outdated fixtures cast long shadows over peeling wallpaper. The ceiling in many of the rooms was discolored from past leaks. The faucet in the kitchen sink was broken, the bathtub was badly chipped, and a few of the cabinet handles fell off in my hand. It was a rundown place, located in a bars on the window kind of neighborhood, but still it was my place. I was smiling ear to ear when Anders gave me the keys. "It's a good house with good bones. You take care of it now," he instructed, which I found ironic. Before he left, he paused in the front doorway, drawing a hand to his chin as he looked behind me into the house. I tried to follow his gaze, but couldn't figure out what he was looking at. "Everything alright?" "Yes. Just that something looks different about that bathroom, though I can't put my finger on what." Well, it's a good house with good bones. You take care of it now." And with that, he gave me a nod and left me to my unpacking. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed living in a house. I didn't care how rundown the place was. Just having an accessible bathroom and a full-size mattress to sleep on made me feel like a king. After I'd spent a few days cleaning the place up, I invited my sister and her fiance over for dinner. I'm sure it sounds stupid, but my newly acquired ability to host company made me proud. In no time at all, I'd comfortably settled into my new home. That evening, after saying goodbye to my guests, I took a shower. The bathroom lacked a traditional above-the-sink mirror. Instead, it had a wide, full-length mirror mounted on the wall to the left of the vanity. When I exited the shower and stepped up to the glass, raising a hand to wipe away the fog, I noticed something odd. In the condensation, right at my eye level, was the word "hi." I didn't know what to make of it. Somehow, the letters seemed intentional. It was hard to pass off as simply the way the steam had settled. My sister had been in the bathroom just before she left. Maybe she had written the word on the mirror with her fingertip, and the steam had only made the letters visible after my shower. I almost texted her about it, but the message seemed ridiculous when I typed it out, paranoid even. I wiped the mirror down and turned in for the night, and soon I forgot about it entirely. The following week, I received a promotion at one of my jobs, and while I was grateful for the additional income, my new position meant longer days. Additionally, I realized that a few of the house repairs were beyond my ability, and so I started outsourcing some work to contractors. It was annoying to only have the house to myself at night, but I didn't have another option with my busy schedule. Things were generally progressing smoothly, though every once in a while, in the middle of the night, I would be awoken by a sound that I couldn't quite place. When I next noticed writing on my mirror, I had been living at the house for a month. The second sighting occurred in much the same way as the first. I came back home after work and took a shower. When I pushed back the shower curtain, I looked at the glass and saw, written in the condensation, the words, "Staying long." Now, I could pass 2 letters off as a coincidence, but 2 words, an entire question. That was no coincidence. Someone had been in my bathroom and recently. frequently. I had contractors in and out of my house all the time, so one of them could have written the message, but why? I got dressed and put a hand on the bathroom doorknob, about to go back into my bedroom, when it occurred to me that whoever had written the message might still be around. I slowly cracked open the door, peering down the dark hallway in one direction, then the other. I listened very carefully, but heard nothing. I walked around my house, which didn't take long given its size, and looked for anything out of place. All of my doors were locked, all of my windows were shut, and none of my personal items had been disturbed. If someone had broken into my house, they were long gone by the time I looked around. That second message put me on edge for days. I triple checked that my windows and doors were locked each night. I looked in every potential hiding spot, of which there were few in my little house, after I came home from work and before I went to sleep. And yet, though I was certain that my house was secure, I couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong. A month passed without incident. I had almost started to feel at home in my new lodgings again until one Friday morning I awoke just past 3 a.m. I couldn't immediately tell what had woken me. Often the house settled at night, creaking and groaning in ways that made it sound alive, but in that moment the house was silent. It was only after I turned my head to the side did I realize that my bedroom door, which I was certain I had shut, was wide open. I stared down the hallway, feeling as though I were gazing into a black hole. The darkness was abyssal. I kept waiting for my eyes to adjust, waiting for them to pick out the familiar shapes of my home, but they never did. I couldn't see a thing, so why did I feel like something could see me? Like there was something in the house with me, just feet beyond the threshold to my bedroom, watching, waiting. Somehow, I found the courage to rise from my bed and walk toward the door. When I made it to the handle, I grabbed it and slammed the door shut. I didn't investigate further, didn't so much as stick my head out into the hall for a closer look. My bedroom door didn't have a lock, none of the doors except the bathroom did, so I dragged my bookcase in front of the door. It was a small bookcase, and an intruder could probably ram the door open anyway if they wanted to, but not before the sound alerted me. When morning came and I had to leave the house for work, I genuinely considered exiting my house through the window. I was almost late by the time I worked up the nerve myself to look around my house before I left. As always, I found nothing amiss. After work, when I reluctantly returned home for the night, I ate a quick dinner and hopped in the shower. I remember standing in the tub for a long time, mulling over my predicament. I'd heard horror stories about people secretly living in other people's homes. Maybe I'd become a victim of a frog without even knowing, but if that was the case, then where the hell were they? There was nowhere to hide in that tiny house. I'd torn the place apart multiple times by then, checking every cabinet and closet. The inside of the house couldn't be accessed from the crawl space, and the air vents were too small for a person to fit in. Suddenly, I heard a click, so tiny that I'd almost missed it entirely. I tore back the shower curtain, gripping the shampoo bottle like I was about to bludgeon an intruder to death with it. As I'd come to expect, there was no one in the room, but there was a new message on the mirror. This one was bold, the easiest to read of any of the messages I'd received so far. It was 3 words long: I see you. Some awful amalgam of fear, confusion, and anger made my stomach churn. Ultimately, the latter emotion rose above the rest. I hastily dried off and threw on some clothes, then grabbed my phone from where I'd left it on the bathroom counter. I punched in Anders' number and glared at that mirror as I listened to the phone ring again and again. I'd started to think it was too late for him to be awake when he suddenly picked up. He started to ask me how I was faring in my new lodgings before I cut him off. I need you to tell me if there's some way that a person could be getting into the house, I said. Every night I check every window and door. I check every cupboard, closet, and cabinet, and still things are amiss. You need to let me know if there's some entry point that I'm not aware of. Anders didn't seem to entirely understand what I was asking. What's getting in? You let me know if you're having rat troubles. My last tenant before you had rat trouble sometimes. Yeah, sure, I've got rats. Besides the doors and the windows, how could they be getting in? Well, there's the vents of course, and there was a chimney once, though we had it sealed up a good long while ago. And there's also the crawl space of course, though I'm sure you've already poked around down there. Though I knew the home had a crawl space, I'd never had much reason to investigate it. I was never able to find the entrance, even after ripping up all the carpeting in the house. Likely, hardwood had been installed over the access door, making it an unlikely point of entry for an intruder. How do I get down to the crawl space? Yes, you should give the crawl space a gander. I barely stopped myself from smashing the phone into the counter. I plan to. Where can I find the entrance? That'll be on the floor of the bathroom closet. I looked around the room. Surely I'd misheard him. Either that or he was confused again. What? I know, it's an odd place for it, but it's only there because that room didn't always used to be a bathroom. The bathroom doesn't have a closet. Sure it does. Just to the left of the vanity. I looked at the mirror, at that long, oversized mirror. I'd always found it odd for a bathroom of that size to have a built-in floor-to-ceiling mirror. What was it that Anders had said when he'd first visited? That something had looked different about the bathroom. Setting my phone down next to the sink, I stepped up close to the glass. I spent a few moments feeling around the frame, looking for a latch, then I grabbed a portion of the right side of the frame in two hands. After one hard yank, the mirror swung open like a door, revealing a large walk-in closet. Anders was saying something on the other end of the line, but I was too stunned to answer. There was a square-shaped hole at the back of the closet, which I assumed led down to the crawl space beneath the house. The closet floor was littered with all kinds of trash. Filthy sheets, fast food containers, beer cans, and I realized some of my own items. Little things I thought I'd misplaced. A sock, a toothbrush, a comb, and a small frame photograph of me, my sister, and our old family dog. I crouched down to pick up the photo, perched in the doorway as I studied my younger, smiling self. I heard Anders say my name over the phone, except the voice didn't sound much like Anders at all. It was too deep, too clear, too close. When I looked up, a man was peeking out at me from the hole in the floor. He smiled at me, his eyes wide and pupils blown, his smile so wide it looked painful, and his hair long and matted. He was only visible from the neck up, and the harsh lighting made it look like a disembodied head was grinning at me from the back of the closet. Horrified, I rose to my feet and ran. I didn't stop running until I made it to my car, which I promptly drove to my sister's house. The next day, I drove to the police station to file a report. An officer met me at the house to check the scene, and I showed him the hidden closet, which indeed had an entrance to the crawl space. My best guess was that the intruder was entering my crawl space from the small door on the side of my house. He'd likely been squatting in the house during the year in which it sat unoccupied, and when he saw it was being prepared for sale, he had disguised the closet door so as to keep a little room for himself. Why he decided to stay, or why he was leaving me messages, I can't say. From his actions and from what little I saw of him, I think it's safe to assume that he wasn't of sound mind. Unfortunately, the man was never found. For all I know, he's still in that same neighborhood. Hell, he might even be in the same house. I moved across the county afterwards and have lived in studio apartments ever since. The thought of living in a big house with all those rooms and corners and places to hide gives me the creeps. It's not just houses that the incident soured for me, but mirrors as well. These days, when I visit a friend or stay at a hotel, I always have to carefully inspect the bathroom mirrors, shining a light directly into their faces and tapping a finger against the glass. Because the worst detail of the whole ordeal was that, when revisiting the bathroom with the police officer, I stepped into the old closet, closed the door, and looked into the mirror. Instead of the mirror backing, I saw the officer's face on the other side of the glass. For context, I have go as far back as my grandmother Sylvia. I don't remember much about her. Most of what I know comes from old photographs and whispered conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. Sylvia grew up in a small, middle-of-nowhere Bible town called Driftwood, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business, and the church bells regulate daily life more reliably than any clock. Her parents, my great-grandparents, were Old Testament types who saw sin lurking behind every corner and liked their early morning coffee with the smell of brimstone. They raised Sylvia to fear God with such intensity that she'd spend hours kneeling on the hardwood floor, praying for forgiveness if she so much as took an extra biscuit from the cupboard. There's an old sepia photograph of her I remember Mum kept around for a while. Small and dark-featured with a gaunt little face and lank, unkempt hair. She wore a strange oversized robe that I later learned was the standard uniform given to the members of the New Eden community. If it's not immediately apparent from the creepy name, yes, it's a cult. You might even remember them by the moniker they later adopted after all the infamy died out. They were pretty notorious in the 1980s when that Venezuelan singer Solomar Valencia joined their ranks. You may know them now as the Brides of Christendom, a questionable rebrand, but it worked. You know the ones? They stand outside Targets and Costco's wearing those robes that look like bohemian bridal gowns, passing out pamphlets and targeting families with any young girls in tow. And that's now now, with all the public scrutiny and police investigations, imagine how bad it was when they were simply known as the New Eden community. A bunch of nut jobs, sure, but harmless and secular and best left alone. This is the world my grandmother grew up in. Now, I'm not sure what happened exactly, though I've done a fair bit of digging since it started, but my grandmother left New Eden when she was roughly 15. She was taken into a halfway house for underaged and disgraced young mothers where she birthed my mother. As far as I'm aware, Sylvia never told my mother who her father was. He must have been a horrible person, because whenever the question was asked, Sylvia would near about lose her mind. She'd get nasty, violent, would force my mother to kneel on sun-baked gravel for the better part of 8 hours whenever she asked the question, and when my mother would hobble back inside, knees bloody and face salty with dried tears, Sylvia would finish off the punishment with 48 hours of enforced starvation. For Sylvia, the more ribs you could see on a person, the more penitent they were. It's no wonder my mother cut ties as soon as she could. She would tell me that Sylvia would wildly pivot between a loving, delicate woman scarred by New Eden to a bitter, abusive tormentor, desperate to pass on some of that same trauma to her own daughter. My mother moved states, got a job, and enrolled in night classes. She worked her butt off and ended up in a junior position at a civil law firm. That's where she met my dad, a paralegal. They fell in love, got married, and soon after, Mom got pregnant with me. The pregnancy nearly killed her. It started with seemingly normal symptoms, a persistent low-grade fever that doctors attributed to a mild chronic infection. She bruised easily, so they pumped her full of vitamins and iron supplements. The tinnitus and heightened sensitivity to smells were written off as typical pregnancy symptoms. But then things started getting weird. My mother developed an overwhelming craving for raw meat. Not just any meat, it had to be fresh, barely touched by refrigeration. My dad would find her in the kitchen at night, standing in the dark, tearing into raw sirloin with her bare hands and teeth. She'd sob afterward, horrified by her own actions, but unable to stop herself. The hunger was all-consuming, primitive. It spooked the hell out of my dad, but he was a first-time father. Pregnancy cravings were a thing, and what the hell did he know? I was strong too strong for a developing fetus. I broke 3 of her ribs as I grew, and the doctors couldn't explain how. But worse than the physical symptoms was the fear. My mother carried around a consuming, endless sense of doom that didn't abate until my birth. She couldn't describe it, couldn't rationalize it, but she was terrified. Not of birth, not of me specifically, but of something else. Something she could sense but not see. It was during her 3rd trimester that she reached out to Sylvia. I think the fear finally overcame her pride, her justified anger at her mother's abuse. No matter their strained relationship, she wanted her mama, and surprisingly, Sylvia came. I found my mother's diary after she passed, and that's how I learned about Sylvia's brief return to our family's life. According to the entries, Sylvia was different, softer, more present. She doted on my mother, cooked for her, helped prepare the nursery. My mother wrote about hope, about the possibility of healing generational wounds through shared experiences of motherhood. Sylvia was respectful, helpful, and anchored during a stressful time, until she tried to drown me in the bathtub when I was 2 weeks old. My dad found her just in time. He didn't see the knife at first. He was too focused on fishing my tiny body out of the water. Sylvia stabbed him, but the blade caught mostly fabric and just a bit of flesh. She was small, malnourished from years of religious fasting and self-imposed punishment, so my father was able to subdue her while still holding on to me. My mother came running when she heard the commotion, and that's when Sylvia started screaming. The things she screamed haunted my mother, enough that she wrote about them constantly in her journals, etched permanently into ink-stained pages as much as her mind. Sylvia had raved about a curse on the women in our family, about how she hadn't been strong enough to kill my mother when she had the chance, and she wouldn't make that mistake with me. Apparently she screamed so hard she coughed up blood. She begged my mother to end our line, said each daughter born was like rolling dice. Not all of us would birth daughters, she said. Some of us would birth something else entirely. They took her away in handcuffs, still screeching about darkness and choosing and something about rooms deep underground where the brides would go. The doctors diagnosed her with religious psychosis, citing her involvement with the New Eden community as the root cause of her break from reality. 3 weeks later, they found her hanging from a bedsheet noose in her room at the psychiatric facility. She left behind a single note for my mother. I tried to save you from being chosen. Now you must save your daughter. End the bloodline before they find her. And my parents did their best to give me a normal childhood after that. They never spoke of Sylvia or what happened, though sometimes I'd catch my mother staring at me with this uncertain look in her eyes. But nothing happened. I grew up, went to college, got a degree in biochemistry, and landed a job in pharmaceutical research. I was the very model of rationality and scientific thinking. Then my parents died in a car accident when I was 27. The police said a deer jumped into the road, causing my father to swerve. Their car hit a tree at 60 miles per hour. The officer who called me said they died instantly, but I later read the coroner's report. The impact didn't kill them, the fire did. Witnesses said the car burst into flames before it hit the tree, though the mechanics found nothing wrong with the fuel line or electrical system. I spiraled after their death. Grief does strange things to people, makes them reckless, desperate for connection. That's how I ended up in a bar 3 months after the funeral, drinking whiskey like it was water and going home with a stranger whose face I can barely remember. The pregnancy test came back positive 6 weeks later. The symptoms started immediately and they were eerily familiar from my mother's diary entries. Like her, I developed an insatiable craving for raw meat. I fought it, knew it had to be bad for the baby. My mind searches for answers in science. Perhaps I had an iron deficiency and needed a protein boost. Maybe there was a genetic component. I held out for almost 2 months before I gave in. It was the best thing I'd ever tasted. I'd find myself standing in my kitchen at 3 a.m., blood dripping down my chin as I devoured raw chicken hearts I'd bought for the dogs. I loved the sound they made, sinew and muscle giving way beneath my teeth. The fever came next, a constant low-grade burn that no doctor could explain. My skin would bruise at the slightest touch. But there were new symptoms too, ones my mother hadn't experienced. I started having dreams, horrible, vivid dreams of dark, underground rooms where something waited in the shadows. It wasn't a memory, I knew that, but it was real. I knew that too somehow. Harriet was born on a moonless night in October. The delivery room lights flickered and died just as she crowned, and when she finally emerged, she didn't cry. She just stared at me with eyes that seemed too knowing for a newborn. The nurses said it was normal, that some babies are just quiet. They ran some tests, signed the birth certificate, swaddled her, and gave her back to me. I went home a day later, alone and relieved. It was short-lived. As she grew, it became clear something wasn't right. Harriet never babbled like other babies. She didn't laugh or cry, just watched, always watching. By age 2, she was diagnosed with solar urticaria, an extreme sensitivity to sunlight that kept her indoors during the day. Her skin would blister and burn within seconds of sun exposure, so we became creatures of the night, venturing out only after sunset. The doctors ran test after test, checking for autism, selective mutism, any explanation for her complete lack of verbal communication. Everything came back normal, but I began to wonder. Small paranoid thoughts began to fester in my mind. I saw the way animals reacted to her, the way neighborhood dogs would whimper and hide when we passed, the way birds would fall silent and still when she looked at them. At night, I'd often find her standing at her bedroom window, small hands pressed against the glass, staring out at our moonlit street as if waiting for something or someone. Sometimes I swore I could hear her whispering, though she'd been nonverbal her entire life. I made a good show of being stern at first, demanding she go to bed. She'd go willingly enough. Oh, she always obedient. But after the 7th or 8th time I caught her standing there, rigid and whispering, I stopped chiding her, stopped searching for her in the night at all. Truth be told, she scared the heck out of me. I'd simply stand in the doorway, watching her silently, rehearsed admonishments curdling in my mouth. One time, as if she'd somehow heard my footsteps, she looked back over her shoulder at me. We simply looked at each other for nearly 15 silent minutes. I swear to God, when I turned to walk away, I think she smirked. She turned 5 on a Monday. The brides of Christendom came on the following Tuesday. 2 women in flowing white robes stood on my doorstep, pamphlets in hand. Their skin was pale, their hair so black it seemed to absorb light. Familiar coloring. I saw similar features whenever I stared in the mirror each morning. I remember staring down at that pamphlet, debating with myself. But I'd been living with a strange little child for 5 harrowing years by that point, and I'd recently finished reading all of my mother's journals. I'd read Sylvia's warning, so I mentioned my grandmother had been part of their community once, and their eyes lit up with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Sylvia's granddaughter, one of them breathed, reaching out to touch my hand. We've been looking for you for so long. I shouldn't have invited them in, but I was desperate for answers about my family history, about Sylvia. They sat primly on my couch, their white robes pooling around them like spilled milk. We talked about mundane things at first, the weather, the neighborhood, their charitable work. They were articulate and warm, speaking passionately about their women's shelters and educational programs. Something about their careful politeness reminded me of funeral directors. doctors. Then Harriet wandered into the room. The change was subtle but immediate. One of them stopped mid-sentence, her carefully practiced smile faltering for just a moment. They exchanged a glance that lasted a fraction too long. The younger one leaned forward slightly, hands clasped in her lap so tightly her knuckles bled white. "What a beautiful child," the older one said. "Is she yours?" "Yes." "Biological?" "Why does that matter?" They began asking questions then, each one seemingly innocent but somehow wrong. Had she always been so quiet? Did she have many friends her age? Was she eating well? Did she sleep through the night? When was her last checkup? When I tried to steer the conversation back to Sylvia, they barely seemed to hear me. Their attention remained fixed on Harriet, who stood silently in the doorway, watching them with her unnaturally still gaze. "We have a wonderful children's program," the younger one said, reaching into her bag. "Many special little girls like Harriet have found their true purpose with us, their true family." Something about the way she said purpose made my skin crawl. I asked them to leave. That night, I heard voices from Harriet's room. Not children's voices, something else. Something that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. When I burst in, she was alone, but her walls, they were covered in drawings. I've worked in pharmaceutical research. I've seen medical textbooks with detailed surgical procedures. Nothing prepared me for what my 4-year-old had drawn. Women split open from throat to pelvis, their organs replaced with writhing shapes that might have been tentacles or might have been something worse. Faces caught in moments of transformation, skin peeling back to reveal something underneath that didn't follow the rules of anatomy. Not a simple child's doodling, I'm telling you. The drawings grew more detailed every night, more disturbing. She drew them with anything she could find, crayons, markers, her own blood when I took away her art supplies. I'd washed the walls clean before bed only to find them covered again by morning, the images more elaborate, more horrifying, naked women being penetrated by shadows that seem to move on the paper. I have no idea how she even knows what sex is. She doesn't watch television, shows little interest in books, doesn't speak with and therefore cannot be influenced by neighborhood kids. I'm not even sure if you could call what she drew sex, to be frank. It came across as more violent, ritualistic. The changes in Harriet accelerated after that. Her skin began to slough off in patches, revealing something dark and iridescent underneath. Her eyes gradually darkened until they were completely black, and her fingernails turned the color of tar. I tried to convince myself it was some kind of infection, but deep down I knew better. At the start, I took her to see doctors and specialists, but nothing worked. When they started mentioning prolonged hospitalization and tests, Harriet would act out violently, both towards me and herself. But at this point, despite spending a lifetime grounded in the exploration of the real, for priding myself in being an individual of sound logic, I knew this was something else. Nothing that medicine could explain, something other. She stopped sleeping. I'd find her standing in different rooms at night, perfectly still, her head tilted at an angle that made my neck hurt just to look at. Sometimes she tracked movement I couldn't see, her black eyes following invisible things across the ceiling. The houseplant started dying, then the grass in our yard, spreading outward from her bedroom window in a perfect circle. I found her in the neighbor's yard one night, crouched over their German Shepherd. The dog's chest was torn open and Harriet's face was buried in the cavity. When she looked up at me, blood dripping from her chin, she spoke for the first time. The sound she made wasn't English, wasn't anything human. It reminded me of the sound oil makes when it hits a hot pan, all sizzle and hiss. But underneath was something else, something that made me taste metal and smell burning hair. I ran inside and vomited until there was nothing left but bile. Forgive me, but I was a mother and I loved her despite it all. I buried the dog before the sun rose, feigned ignorance when the neighbors came knocking. I found the dog's collar days later, hidden beneath Harriet's pillow like some kind of trophy. She should have been locked up in a psychiatric ward that day, but I was weak, and besides, it wouldn't have worked. Desperate, I began researching the New Eden community. I found an online forum for survivors and connected with a user called the Wicked Below 82. She seemed to know things, horrible things, about the community's true purpose, about the 7 compounds spread across North America, Germany, and Australia, about the rooms deep underground where they took the girls who were ready. Her messages became increasingly frantic as we talked. She told me about her time in the compound, about the screams that echoed up from below, about the girls who went down with flat stomachs and came up 9 months later with something moving under their skin. She would have gone herself if she hadn't developed a cancer young that rendered her likely infertile. Thank everything for osteosarcoma, she joked. Then she asked about Harriet's symptoms, and each answer I gave made her more agitated. You need to end it, she wrote finally, before they complete the circle, before before all 7 are born. I can't find her account anymore. I hope nothing has happened to her, but that brings us to tonight. Tonight, I woke to a smell like rotting meat. Following it led me to Harriet's room, where I found a pile of what looked like shed snakeskin, but I recognized the birthmark on one piece. The blood trail led to our bathroom where I found her. Jesus, I can barely write it. I can't describe what my daughter had become. What sat in our bathtub looked almost right, but wrong in ways my mind couldn't properly process. Like when you see a face in a dream and know it's your mother, but wake up remembering features that couldn't possibly fit together into a human face. Parts of her seemed to fade in and out of my vision, as if whatever she was becoming couldn't fully exist in our reality. When she moved, her joints bent in directions that made my eyes hurt. Her skin rippled like oil on water, and underneath was something that made me understand why Sylvia went mad. I did what my grandmother had tried to do, what she knew needed to be done. The thing that had been my daughter thrashed and fought, but in the end I held it under the water. I kept whispering, I'm sorry, even as its claws tore into my arms, even as I watched my baby girl's face shift between human and monster under the thrashing water. The hardest part wasn't the physical struggle, it was when she stopped fighting, when her face became human again and she looked up at me through the water with those big brown eyes, my eyes, and reached for me like she used to when she was small, like she wanted her mama to hold her. But I'd seen what was inside her now. I knew what was coming. I held on until the bubbles stopped, and then I ran. Everything was completely normal until last year. We had what felt like a totally typical marriage. I remember the night things started to get weird because it was right after our 5th wedding anniversary. It was a regular day working at the bank when I got a text from my wife. A text from her in the middle of the day was not unusual, but what the text said was definitely not like my wife. Hey babe, I had an idea for something new we could try when you get home. Now, don't get me wrong, I was thrilled to get this text in the middle of my workday. I think any man would be ecstatic at a text like that, but I was having a hard time getting too excited because something about it felt so off. My wife has never been the kind of woman to send a message like this, let alone want to try something new. She is a very shy and to herself woman. The day moved at a snail's pace as I anticipated what my wife had in store for me. I tried not to overhype it in my head. I prepared myself to find a baked good or something when I walked into the house. I fully believe she didn't mean to send a winky face. Not to say I would have been disappointed with whatever she had in store. I'm not much of a wild guy myself, but a little spice never hurt anyone, right? When I pulled into the driveway, I was surprised to see most of the house lights were off. I suspiciously unlocked the front door to see my beautiful wife standing facing away from me in the doorway to the bedroom. My happiness from seeing her quickly grew into confusion when she didn't turn around to look at me when I walked in and said her name. She would normally run up to me and give me a big hug. In the past, my wife has always been the sweetest person I've ever known. For her to not run up and give me a hug and a kiss was strange. I made my way inside after waiting a second, trying to be as loud as possible in the hope she would suddenly notice I was home and look at me. I got closer and noticed she wasn't moving other than her soft breaths. I was standing right behind her and tapped her on the shoulder. Hey sweetheart, are you okay? Right as I got out my words, she jumped around to face me with a giggle and smile. Ha, that was so funny. Did I scare you? She said while covering her mouth in an attempt to hide her toothy laugh. Yeah, I guess you really did scare me, I replied with a nervous chuckle. So was that your special surprise you talked about? Of course not, silly. That was just the beginning of the fun, she remarked with a smirk and a wink. She grabbed my hand and led me into our bedroom. Under normal circumstances, I would have been over the moon about it, but her scaring me just before leading me into the bedroom felt so off-putting. Did she think this would turn me on somehow? Did one of my buddies reach out to her and tell her to do this? All I knew was that I was not interested in whatever romantic endeavors my wife had planned. I never thought I would say that. As we got to the bed, she pulled back all the covers and told me to lie down. I honestly felt like telling her I had a headache or something, but it was clear she had been thinking about this all day and I really didn't want to discourage my wife from initiating things in the future. My mind was spinning with thoughts of what she might do next, but she did something I didn't expect. She put the covers back over me and tucked me in. I was both relieved and more confused than ever. She gave me a soft smile, then in one fast motion fell to the ground like a sack of wet hammers. I intuitively sat up and leaned over the side of the bed to make sure she was okay, and was only met with the ends of her long brown hair peeking out from the bottom of the bed. "Hey Catelyn, why are you hiding? Can you please come out? I'm not a fan of this game you're playing," I murmured in a tone trying to not sound freaked out. I was only met with the sound of a muffled giggle. I sat in bed for the next 10 minutes trying to tell her to stop. It went from polite asking to begging, but the laughter didn't stop. After my begging didn't seem to work, I got the courage to get out of bed and look beneath me. As soon as I put my foot down, she grabbed my ankle. "What the hell, Catelyn? This isn't funny. You have fun here, I'm sleeping on the couch." I slammed the bedroom door behind me and curled up on the living room couch. I could still hear her laughing from the joke I seemed to miss. It was so hard to sleep that night. The image of her hair barely peeking out from under the mattress really stuck in my head for some reason. It took a while, but I finally fell asleep. The next morning I was up for work a couple hours before her, so we didn't get the chance to talk. I had to go into the bedroom to get my clothes for work, so I peeked under the bed to check on her. She was sleeping peacefully on her stomach, and I tried not to wake her. It was a long, hard day at work. I wasn't really feeling all that scared anymore, more so worried for my wife. I wasn't sure how I could help. Around 10 a.m. I got a text from her. "Hey Emmett, I'm really sorry about last night. I have a lot of explaining to do once we both get home. Can we talk over some pizza?" I felt so much better after reading those words. It might seem insignificant, but my wife hates pizza, so whenever she is willing to eat it with me, I know she is putting in the effort. It was the end of the day and I headed home looking forward to some pizza and some time with my hopefully back to normal wife. I walked through the door and was relieved to see my wife setting the table and putting down a pizza box. She heard the door shut and ran to give me a hug and a kiss. I really felt like I had my wife back. "I'm so glad you're home. Sit down, sit down. I got pizza from your favorite place down the road," she said as she pulled a chair out for me to sit down. We were both quiet for a minute or two after we both sat down. I don't think either one of us knew how to start the conversation. Just as I was about to speak up, she started to talk. "So I know last night was weird. I just got really insecure after hearing a few of my coworkers talk about the things they do with their partners, and I was worried you thought I was too boring. I know I can be shy and don't like to do anything crazy and started to feel guilty for not doing more with you. I wasn't entirely sure how to even go about it or what you would like, so I just went for it. I understand now how I went wrong. I'm sorry, I just don't know how to do this kind of thing," she said as if she had rehearsed it many times in her head. "Why would you ever think I was bored of you? I don't need any of that wild stuff. I married you for a reason. You don't need to try to be something you're not. I love you for who you are," I said as I grabbed her hand. She took a deep breath and looked at me with watery eyes. "I love you too. Thank you for being so understanding. I really want to make it up to you." "That's very kind, but the pizza is enough for me." "No, I'm really serious. I did some more research and found a few good ideas," she said as she put her hand on my thigh. I was so torn at that moment. I was terrified from the night before, but it seemed like she learned from her mistakes. Sure, it was an incredibly strange mistake to think scaring me would get me in the mood, but she is extremely sheltered. That's what I was trying to tell myself. I knew deep down something was still wrong and I should just say no, but I think many people can understand how your body can go on autopilot in moments like this. At this point, nothing was going to stop me, and I'd give every excuse in the book as to why it was okay to let her do her thing. Just like last time I was led to our bed, she made me lay down and immediately put my hands over my head into handcuffs and put a blindfold on me. My heart was racing at this point. I was terrified, but human nature was taking over and it could not be overridden. Right as she put the blindfold on me, she stepped back and I didn't hear her move. I was expecting her to do something to me, but nothing. I laid on the bed feeling more exposed than I ever felt possible. After a couple minutes, I heard the floor squeak and it confirmed that she had been standing right by the bed the whole time. I felt like I could feel her eyes staring at me. It was practically burning a hole in my skin. I heard the light switch flick off. Now I really couldn't see anything. After a few moments of anticipation, I felt her fingertips graze the sheets near my sides, then by my feet, just barely missing any part of my body. I started to maybe get hope again that I shouldn't be scared. Sure, this wasn't what I had in mind, but she was new to this. I was very wrong. That was the last moment I had hope for my wife. This was teasing. This was torture. I was soon met with the sound of her scraping her fingernails against the walls like a wild animal. She moved around the room, scratching anything she could find, along with a brief giggle here and there. It was like she was silently moving from corner to corner. I would hear her make the awful scraping, then it would stop for a second. Then I would be jump scared by her doing the same thing in a different spot. It made my skin crawl like I had a million little bugs crawling on the inside of my skin. I wiggled violently, trying to get out of the restraints or to get the blindfold off, but I was trapped. It kept getting worse as the night went on. She kept getting right by my ear. Sometimes she would just breathe, and other times she would let out a giggle. She would run her hands closer and closer to my body, sending me into a cold sweat. I of course didn't have a way of telling the time, but I would guess it was about an hour in when I stopped begging her to let me go and I just started yelling for help. I guess she didn't like that because she put duct tape over my mouth. Shortly after that, I started to hear the scraping sound on the ceiling. Our bedroom has an extremely high ceiling, so I had a hard time imagining how she was doing it. I couldn't believe the situation I was in. It felt like a terrible nightmare. I kept thinking any minute I would wake up next to my gorgeous wife sleeping soundly beside me, but the nightmare lived on. My wrists felt raw and bloodied. My neck was sore from moving it back and forth trying to get the blindfold off. My whole body ached from trying to free myself, but all that paled in comparison to the psychological torture my wife was putting me through. Not being able to see her next move and not knowing how far she was going to go killed me inside. Before I knew it, I was waking up the next day, still tied up and blindfolded like the night before, but I didn't hear my wife around. I didn't let my guard down, however. I knew she could just be waiting for me to relax, then jump out and scare me again. After wiggling my head around for a bit, I finally got the blindfold off. I was honestly scared to open my eyes. I was terrified that my wife would be standing in the corner waiting for me to look at her. Luckily, when I opened my eyes, she was nowhere to be found, but the relief was brief after seeing the aftermath of my bedroom. Nearly every square inch was scratched, even on the 20-foot ceiling above my head. Some of the scratches even had blood in them. As I looked around at my ruined room, I heard my phone buzzing on the bedside table. Either I put it there before getting into bed or my wife put it there. At this point, it didn't matter, but having my phone near me could be a saving grace. I figured it was my boss calling me since it was 10 a.m. and I wasn't at work. I wasn't sure if my wife had any plans of coming back to get me, but maybe if I didn't show up to work, my boss would get worried about me and come looking for me. I soon had the realization that if they called my emergency contact, it would just be my wife, and I wasn't sure how helpful she'd be at this point. I laid down in my bed the rest of the day, miserable as I watched the hours go by, my stomach growling and my arms were sore from them being above my head for the last 24 hours. It was around 9 p.m. when my phone started getting calls like crazy. I remembered I had plans to get dinner with my brother and he was probably worried about me. I am not the kind of person to just bail. After a couple hours of calling, I heard a few knocks at the door, followed by my brother's voice. It was muffled, but I could tell he was worried. I heard keys start to wiggly in the doorway. He had a set of keys in case I lost my pair and needed to get in the house. He opened the door and yelled out my name as I tried to be as loud as possible, thrashing my body around as I tried to scream out the duct tape that was nearly off my face. Emmett, what the hell, dude? My brother yelled and he ran to my aid. He immediately ripped the duct tape off my face. Oh my gosh, thank goodness you are here, get me out now. Dude, I didn't think you and Catelyn were down bad like that. Nice, my brother said with a smirk. Daniel, this is not the time, get me out, I said with more aggression. Okay, hang on, he murmured as he tried to get the cuffs off. After trying for a while, we found it impossible to get them off without a key. He ended up just getting my bolt cutters and cut them off. It was nearly midnight when I was finally out. My arms were so sore it took me forever just to get them back down at my sides. So, do you want me to pretend I didn't see any of this or something? Daniel said in a casual tone. What? No, it's not what it looks like. Trust me. I wish it was what it looks like. Catelyn is sick or something. She trapped me here all night and practically tortured me. Look, I know we are close and all, but I don't think I need those kinds of details from my own brother, he remarked with a chuckle. You aren't listening to me. Look at the walls and the ceiling. She did this. She is scaring me. I don't know what to do. He looked around the room and then at the ripped apart ceiling, not fully grasping the situation but clearly concerned. Okay, come stay with me tonight if you are freaked out, he said, half annoyed and half worried. I grabbed a few pairs of clothes out of the closet and shoved them in a bag. I wasn't sure how long I was going to be gone, but I wanted to be prepared. My brother only lives a few minutes down the road, so it was an easy drive. The whole time I was worried my wife was going to appear and scare me. We made it inside my brother's house and he apologized for not having a guest bed. He's in his early 20s and lives alone, so he doesn't have much space. But honestly, I didn't want to be far away from him. I didn't dare to tell my little brother I needed him and I was scared, but I think he could tell I wasn't okay. Listen, I don't really get what is going on, but it's getting really late and we both should sleep. Let me know if you need need anything, he said as he awkwardly walked into his room 10 feet away from the couch I was lying on. I had a terrible time falling to sleep that night. Whenever I closed my eyes, I just heard the sounds of her nails scraping the walls in my head. I kept thinking, and I felt her warm breath against my ear. I'd open up my eyes to find the room empty. It was starting to feel like the anticipation of her was becoming just as bad as her actually torturing me. I woke up the next morning exhausted. My whole body felt like I was just in a car accident from being so tense for so long, and I only got 3 hours of sleep. I realized that if life was still normal, my wife would make me hot tea and a warm bath with all her fancy essential oils that probably do nothing, but she always puts so much love into it. I started to feel myself slip. I felt sadness creeping in, but none of that mattered. I had to go to work. I couldn't have a no call no show and then call out of work the next day. I would feel terrible about it. Plus, I wanted to apologize to my boss in person. The work day started out strange when I tried to ask forgiveness from my boss, but he acted strange at my apology. He explained that my wife gave him a call and said I wasn't feeling well and I would be absent from work that day. I guess despite everything, my wife still didn't want me to get a slap on the wrist at work. That was only the beginning of the strange day. I found a dead rat in my desk drawer, spiders in my locker, and a huge clump of hair in my lunch. It seemed like I was the only employee being harassed, but they ended up closing and sending everyone home at around 3 p.m. because a few higher ups got nervous and thought they needed to look into it. Banks tend to take stuff like this seriously. I went out to my car to leave for the day and was in shock to find a note on my car. "Did that do it for you? Catelyn." I knew it was her, I just didn't want to believe it. The last thing in the world I wanted to do was talk to the woman. I was terrified at this point, but I had to beg her to stop. For some reason, she thought I had some weird kink for being scared. Or maybe she developed one. Regardless, I had to tell her if it didn't stop, I was going to leave her, or even get a restraining order. I didn't want to meet her in person by myself. I didn't know what stunt she would try and pull to convince me to give her one more chance. Since my brother was already partly up to date on the situation, I asked him if he would be there for our meeting. It might be awkward, but I needed him. I didn't want to involve more people than necessary. I texted them both individually and told them to meet me at a coffee shop that night. It was 7 p.m. and my brother was already sitting next to me waiting for my wife to walk in. As she walked in, it was clear she was putting on an act. She looked overly sad and was dressed in bright clothes that she'd never worn in the past, trying to make herself look innocent. She pulled out a chair and sat down at our table. The air was thick and awkward. "Catelyn, I wanted to meet in person and have Daniel here because I need you to know whatever you are pulling here isn't what I want. I'm not enjoying whatever act you are putting on. I'm not turned on. I don't find it sexy. Whatever you want to call it. Please stop. If this is something you are into, I think we need to talk to a professional because it's scaring me," I said earnestly as her eyes got watery and Daniel slouched in his chair uncomfortably. I don't know what to say, babe. I have to say I'm confused. I know I'm new to this experimenting thing, but I'm doing my best. This is what you asked of me. I'm just trying to be a good wife. You know me, I'm as vanilla as they come. You are the one who asked me about these acts. I'm just doing my best. She stressed as she fought back tears. Daniel looked at me with confused eyes. "Wait, hang on, what's going on? I didn't think you asked for any of this, Emmett," Daniel said. "I didn't, I swear. I have no idea what she is talking about. I would never ask anything like that from her." I pleaded to my brother. "You are sick, you know that? Why are you doing this to me?" she uttered as she pulled out an envelope and tossed it on the table. Daniel and I looked at each other before he reached for it and opened it up. Inside was a letter that Daniel read out loud. "Dear Catelyn, I love you with all my heart, but I'm afraid I'm getting bored of the same old, same old. I want something more. I am writing this out as I might feel weird saying it face to face, but I've been thinking about it and, well, nothing gives me a high quite like when I am scared. And I mean truly terrified. The adrenaline rush is like nothing else. I think if we employ this into our lives, it would really spice things up, in the everyday and in the bedroom. I hope you understand and don't get put off by this, but I really want it. Under no circumstance if I say stop should you stop. If I tell you I'm too scared, you know you are doing something right. I can't wait to see what you come up with, Emmett." He lowered the note to look at me, only finding shock on my face. "What the hell, dude? Why would you do this to your wife? And get me involved. This is so messed up and gross. Don't get me involved in your sick kinks ever again," he said as he threw the note at me and stormed out of the coffee shop. I begged him not to leave, but he didn't even turn around. I sat and stared at my wife, terrified. "What on earth is going on here? You and I both know I didn't write that garbage," I angrily whispered to her. Her face slowly morphed from sad to a satisfied grin. Stop it, I don't like this. Why don't you realize I hate what you are doing?" I cried. "When will you realize everything isn't always about you? Maybe I'm the one who likes it," she said as she lifted her eyebrows. "Stop, you are scaring me," I begged. "Good, then it's working," she said as she pushed her chair back and stood up. She turned around and looked like she was going to leave. Just as she was about to open the door, she stopped. She turned back around and looked at me. She slowly walked back toward me and picked up the note my brother threw. She grinned at me smugly as I trembled in fear. She leaned down to my ear and whispered, "I guess I did a good job imitating your handwriting, huh?" she said as I remained frozen in my seat. I watched as she walked out, got in her car and left, not knowing what to do next. She turned my own brother against me. This wasn't a miscommunication or something. She was doing this on purpose. She was torturing me. But why? It couldn't be just because she was bored of everyday life. Something was wrong. I knew my brother wouldn't want me back at his place. He saw what looked to be proof of me being a nasty scumbag. I wouldn't be able to convince him otherwise. I went to a hotel for the night. I didn't have other options. I didn't want to burden anyone else with this. Plus, I figured she'd just turn them against me too. After what felt like the longest day of my life, I was in my hotel bed trying to relax. I got a text from my boss letting me know they had to close the bank for the next couple of days because they were doing an investigation. I felt some relief from this. At least I didn't have to worry about work for a day or two. I don't remember much of that night, but I do remember the outcome of the early morning. I remember feeling cold and wet. I opened my eyes to see I was in the woods and lying in a very shallow grave. Most of my body was above ground with a small pile of dirt on top of me. I was frozen in fear, the fear of my wife lurking around somewhere. It seemed like she tried to bury me alive but did a half-worked job. I tried looking around at the dark forest to try and get my bearings, but only found more confusion and dread. The cold morning wind whistling around me added to my looming fear, as if it was taunting me, but it didn't scare me nearly as badly as my wife. I looked around for her to try and find her, but only got more and more worried when I didn't see her. I heard the sound of twigs snapping from every side. Eventually I heard a grinding, clicking sound. It sounded robotic but also human. Then it turned into a giggle. I never thought the sound of my wife's giggle would haunt me so feverishly. The sound would come from far to the right, then switch to my left, faster than she would have been able to get that far, much like she did in our bedroom a couple nights back. I started to hear footsteps along with the twigs breaking. I swore it didn't sound like she was walking on 2 feet but on all fours. I tried not to think about it. I told myself my mind was playing tricks on me. I shook my head back and forth in an attempt to shake the visions out of my head. I found the strength in me to get to my feet and to run. I noticed what looked like the right direction to move in, based on the ground being disturbed. Like she dragged me through the dirt to the spot I woke up in. After running for a few minutes, the trail looked familiar. I knew I was close to home. When I would hear the footsteps, I would turn my head to look, only to barely miss her. After what felt like forever, I saw her. She was on all fours circling me, running like a wild animal, her tongue sticking out of her mouth like a dog. I hardly recognized her. Her circles around me got tighter and tighter. As she got closer to me, she slowed down. Eventually, she got right in front of me and stood up on her 2 legs. I tried to run around her, but before I knew it, she pinned me down. I could barely recognize her up until this point, but something clicked when she got close to me. I looked into her eyes, but I didn't see my wife. I saw something else. I guess I should have guessed sooner, but something was wrong with my wife, because this thing wasn't my wife. "What did you do with her?" I yelled in her face. "You will never find her," she whispered with a hoarse voice. As drools started to come out of her mouth, she abruptly jumped off of me and scurried back into the woods. The last words she said echoed in my head, "You will never find her." The relief I felt knowing my wife might still be out there, but how was I supposed to find her? I couldn't keep up the running my whole way home, but managed to sprint. I kept thinking she was gone, then I would hear her nearby, taunting me. I got back to our house. I hadn't been there since this all started happening a couple days ago, so I was scared to see what the inside looked like. I knew I couldn't stay for long. I saw her car still in the driveway, so I planned to take it. My car was still at my hotel, but I needed to make it hard for her to get around. I thought I would also look for clues for my real wife while I was there. After I entered the house, I was shocked to see the state it was in. My wife would rather die than see her home look like this. Glass broken on the ground from wine glasses, dirt and trash in random piles, a foul stench filling my nose. I couldn't believe what that thing did to our once beautiful home. The horrible smell distracted me, but I remembered my goal once I saw some blood. I followed it to the basement staircase. I grabbed the fire poker by our fireplace and walked to the door leading to the basement. I felt guilty for taking so long and not just heroically running down the steps to hopefully see my wife, but my whole being was so full of dread I couldn't help but feel fear. I knew I had to fight, but every part of my body wanted to flee. The door creaked as I pushed it open. It was hard to tell if it was louder than normal or if the moment made it feel excruciating. I peered through the door to see more blood on the stairs. A lot of blood. I ran down as fast as I could without slipping, noticing blood on the guardrails as I tried to grab them. As I made it to the bottom of the steps, I was in shock. I saw my wife. She laid on the cold, unfinished basement floor. Her breath was visible but faint, covered head to toe in cuts and scrapes. I ran to her and collapsed beside her, weeping like a baby. Catelyn, please get up. Come on, we need to get you out of here. You need help and I don't want her to find us," I said with a panicked breath. What's going on? Was I sleeping down here? Wow, my head hurts," she whispered in a groggy voice. "No time for that now, I'm getting you some help," I proclaimed as I lifted her up in my arms with a sudden burst of adrenaline. It was clear from her injuries she needed medical attention, but I wasn't worried for her life. There is no way the amount of blood I saw in the house was all from her. If it was all hers, she'd be on the verge of death. That awful creature must have gotten some blood somewhere else to scare me more, as if the sight of my wife on the floor was grisly enough. We rushed to the hospital in what felt like record time. As I carried her in, the hospital staff approached us asking all kinds of questions. I tried my best to explain, but it didn't sound right coming out of my mouth. I couldn't explain any of it because I was still trying to understand it myself. The staff got my wife set up in a hospital bed. She had an IV for some fluids and some stitches here and there. After a couple hours, she seemed to perk up, but she could tell I wasn't being myself just yet. "Babe, I know you are freaked out, but don't be so cold to me. I just went through something awful. Please, I need you now more than ever," my wife said from her bed across the dimly lit room. I was trying to be as loving as possible, but I just couldn't get some images out of my head. I was desperately trying to remember my wife before that monster came into the picture, but it was so hard. Her face went from sad to an over-exaggerated pout in an attempt to make a sad puppy dog face. She tried to make the cutest faces she could. I got closer and closer to her and her happiness grew. I ended up sitting on her bed with her. She leaned close to me and puckered her lips. I gave in and had a blissful kiss with my wife. Until she bit down. I tried to pull away, but she had such a grip I could tell I'd badly hurt my lip if I resisted. Instead, we both sat in silence. Her breathing got slow and deep as my heart rate increased. She slowly loosened her bite but stayed uncomfortably close to my face. "Say a word and I will scream," she whispered. Before I could process what was happening, she reached for my hand and grabbed my pinky. Then she violently forced it the wrong way. I screamed in pain as I heard the snap of my finger breaking. My ears were ringing in shock. As I reacted, my wife did as well. "Get away from me, you horrible monster. Get off of me. Don't you dare touch me," she yelled at the top of her lungs. I backed away from her. Confused and shocked medical staff ran into our room. "What the hell is happening here?" a tall man said. "Sir, thank goodness you are here. My husband is trying to hurt me. He is the one who gave me these injuries. I didn't want to tell anyone because I was too scared he would hurt me even more. Please help me. Now he is trying to hurt me again," she desperately cried. No, do not believe her. "Look at what she did to my lip and my finger. I'm the one who needs help. This woman is torturing me," I said, pleading to the staff as a nurse chimed in. "Those look like wounds of a woman defending herself, buddy. Don't play the victim." "No, please. Someone has to help me. This isn't my wife. This is a monster. She's manipulating you all." I finished my sentence as two large security guards came to take me out. As I left the room, I turned back to look at that thing sitting in the hospital bed. It grinded at me. It was still playing a game, still scaring me to my very core. I made it outside with the 2 security guards and they helped me into a cop car. As we drove, I saw my whole life falling apart before my eyes. I realized I was probably going to jail. She would find her way to make me seem guilty of abuse and who knows what else. She would bend the truth. She even had my own brother on her side. Not only did I come to terms with going to jail, but with the fact that my wife was gone. Even if my real wife was still alive, I've been through so much trauma with that monster that I could never see her the same again. At that moment, my whole world was shattered. I felt emotions inside me bubbling up. I felt sadness, pain, anger, all so strong I didn't know what to do. Just as I fought off my tears, I was jolted out of my depression with the cop car swerving off the road suddenly. Every part of my body tensed up as the car flipped and went into a ditch. I was dizzy, but somehow still lucid. I managed to get my seatbelt unbuckled, but soon found myself in an awkward position, just lying in the flipped car waiting for help. The 2 officers in the front seat were passed out. I was pretty sure one of them was dead by looking at him. After lying in the flipped car weighing my options, I saw someone walking around the car. I yelled for help, but my heart sank when I realized it was her. Suddenly, the car that just moments ago made me feel trapped now felt like my saving grace. The only thing separating me and that monster. I did my best to keep my eye on where she was, but she managed to get around too fast. Before I knew it, she reached through the broken window, grabbed my ankles, and ripped me out of the car. I could feel the glass shards ripping at my skin as she forced me out. She got me out and dragged me a couple feet away from the car. She stood above me, straddling me. Her arms were blooded from pulling me out of the car. She got closer to me slowly, eventually sitting on my chest. As she got close, I could see how bad she looked. Her hair was knotted and ratty, her skin looked dry and weathered. My whole body ached at the sight of her. If this was my wife, something was really wrong. Wasn't that thrilling? She remakes with a crazed look in her eye. Stop it, just stop it. I will leave you and get a restraining order against you. I will do anything in my power to get away from you. I pleaded with her weight on my chest. How do you think you'll get away with that? I have everyone on my side. I have written evidence that makes me seem innocent. No one will ever believe you. You are putty in my hands. Is this what you want, for me to go to jail, to make me look like an abusive, sexually corrupt man? Why are you doing this? I said with desperation. Go to jail? Who said I wanted you to go to jail? Who do you think stopped the cop car? The Tooth Fairy, she said with a chuckle and twisted smile. Then why did you tell all those lies about me? Why are you trying to make me look guilty and then the next minute save me? If you go to jail, the chase is over. You will be protected by the jail walls and steel bars that keep us separated. I won't be able to keep scaring you. Jail would be freedom for you, freedom from me. What if I would rather go to jail than have you constantly lurking around every corner? I said with squinted eyes. She met my gaze and got even closer. She whispered something that sent a chill down my spine. Go to jail and give up finding your beautiful bride? You sick bastard, I said as I tried to sit up to grab her, but she pinned my arms down. You thought because of the little stunt I pulled I was making up a lie about your wife still being out there? Don't be silly. You know your wife. She would never act like this. How do I know you aren't bluffing? I said as my eyes filled with hate. Think of it this way. Would you rather keep looking for her your whole life, then on your deathbed realize it was all a lie? Or go to jail and realize on your deathbed that your real wife was alive the whole time, trapped away somewhere, desperately waiting for her knight in shining armor to come to save her, but he never came? What a shame that would be, huh? She uttered with a soft, maniacal tone. Who are you? Why are you doing this? I said as she let go of my wrists and sat up, and began to speak in a normal, cheering tone. What do you mean, goofball? I'm your wife. I'm doing it because I love you. I felt even more scared to see her attitude shift so suddenly. I could see what she was trying to do, showing me how she could manipulate me and others. She got off of me and walked a few feet away. More cops will be here soon. I will keep them off your trail so you have time to get away, but don't get too comfy. Wherever you go, I will find you. Once I find you, keep running. I want you to keep having a sense of getting away from me. I want you to feel safe so I can take that feeling away from you again. I rose to my feet, looking at her in awe. I knew I couldn't be completely confident in my real wife still being alive, but the thought of her in a cold room waiting for me echoed through my head. I had to keep running. I had to keep looking, even if that was exactly what she wanted from me. I started to run. I ran with no clue where I was going. I didn't have a home to go to. Nowhere was safe. I was hopeless. I spent the next several months running away. I hitchhiked and found odd jobs. I even found a super sketchy doctor's office that took some cash I had in my my wallet. I had to get some help with the injuries I sustained. A few separate times I thought I was safe. I thought I had outrun the police and, more importantly, my wife. The first time I realized she found me, I opened the door to find bloody teeth all over my doorstep. I was in the next place for about 6 weeks but kept getting ding-dong ditchers. I thought it was just kids, but no kid would be doing it on the hour every hour for days straight. That brings us to the current day. I won't give details on my location in case she is reading this. However, I'm not completely sure if she has found me or not. Sometimes I hear scraping on the outside of the house, or what sounds like something inside my walls. I tell myself it's just animals because it makes me feel better. She might be trying to be less obvious, so I stop running. I was relieved at first that she wasn't doing anything too terrifying, but then I realized it's worse to not know if it's her or not. I've been spending most of my time hoping and praying that my real wife is still out there. I can't help look for her as well as I like, given I'm very far from home. I worry that if I just sit around and wait, they will never find her. Not as long as that thing pretends to be my wife. My biggest fear of all is that she is my real wife. Is she giving me false hope so I have a reason to stay out of jail and a reason to live? No, I can't believe that. I will never give up hope. I love you, Catelyn, and I will keep looking for you.
If you enjoyed these stories, please consider subscribing and liking this video. Let me know your thoughts of these stories in the comments below. I frequently talk to my viewers there. But anyways, I hope you were creeped out.
Just kidding. Stay safe.